Truth Talks. Please, I'm excited about the Truth Talks. They are addressing true fellowship and what it means, what true fellowship and corporate worship looks like according to the Bible.
I will sing to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
Okay, we're going to move right into chapter 8. In chapter 8, we're talking about the vision of the ram and the he-goat. And in the very first verse, it says, "In the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar, the king, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, subsequent to the one which appeared to me previously." So this is his second vision. You know, the first one he had was years before. This is the second vision. And this is God's declaration of the end from the beginning. Let's call it that. Let's call it that. Let's put a title on that. God's declaration of the end from the beginning. So verse number 2, I looked in the vision, and while I was looking, I was in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam. I looked in the vision, and I myself was beside the Ulai Canal. First thing that caught my attention there was he specifies that as he looked in his vision, that's where he saw himself. It doesn't say he was there specifically, but it says as he looked in his vision, that's where he saw himself. And that question came up later on in the chapter, because there was some question about where was Daniel at when he had this vision. Daniel was actually in Babylon. He was still in Babylon during the reign of during Belshazzar's reign. So when he had the vision, he was spiritually, let's say spiritually transported to that place where God showed him the vision. So the vision was in chapter 7, we saw he gave Daniel the vision of the forthcoming world empires. But in that, it wasn't revealed which empires they would be. It was only revealed that there would be 4 successive empires, right? And each, I guess you could say, here is further revelation of his first vision, more information as time goes on. He doesn't find out the identity of 4 empires until in chapter 8 here. I already said, no, he will, the specific kingdoms that will rise, only there that will be 4 kingdoms. That's important because here in chapter 8, Daniel's second vision, God revealed to him the focuses on the kingdoms of Medo-Persia and Greece. And that's what it says here. Verse 3, then I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a ram which had 2 horns was standing in front of the canal. Now the 2 horns were long, but one was larger than the other, with the longer one coming up last. So right off the bat, you see God reveals what he wants to reveal to us, when he wants to reveal it, right? He revealed some of the information to Daniel in the first vision, in chapter 7, but then he reveals quite a bit more in his second vision when he had the vision of the ram and the goat. Some might say that no man can declare what is to come, and they're right. No man can declare what is to come, but God can, and he does it over and over again in his word. And he reveals it to his servants so that we can testify that he truly is God. So in verse, we're going to go to verse 4. I'll explain a little bit more about verse 3 a little bit later. Verse 4 says, I saw the ram budding westward, northward, and southward, and no other beast could stand before him, nor was there anyone to rescue him from his power. But he did as he pleased and magnified himself. The Medo-Persian Empire, the two horns were long horns, but they grew to be longer. One grew to be longer than the other. And that was the Medo and Persian halves of that one empire. The Persian being the greater of the two, which is signified by the longer horn and the shorter horn. And no beast could stand before him as he pushed westward, northward, and southward. So he did according to his will to magnify himself. The goat is the Greek Empire. Now, I was studying my curiosity got the better of me, and I wanted to know where the he-goat had come from. And the scripture says the beast came from the west over the face of the whole earth without touching the ground. You see that? Okay. Now, geographically, Greece lies to the west of Persia. And that's where the beast came from, the west. And without touching the ground, and had a notable horn between his eyes. This may indicate the swiftness and fury with which Alexander the Great, who was the first king of Greece, defeated and took over the Medo-Persian Empire. History tells us that it took King Alexander about 3 years to conquer and destroy the Persian armies. We see that the single horn between the goat's eyes is the first king, that is Alexander the Great. The single horn also represents the single leadership of Alexander, of his kingdom, the entire kingdom of Greece. He was the sole leader and king of Greece. It is said that the goat attacked the ram in great anger. In history, we find that the Persians had previously attacked the Greeks, and now it's time to retaliate against the Persians. That may have something, yes.
Alexander's the Great, just the history part of what you're bringing in.
Mhm.
Alexander's great father was killed by the Persians. The
Yes.
same one that was sitting there.
Yes.
That's the conflict that starts.
And they raided each other back and forth. And at this time, but Alexander the Great wasn't the king at the time. It was his father.
To your point about God giving us pieces of information,
Mhm.
we're talking about that.
Mhm.
He's always done that. Old Testament times, he spoke to the prophets and gave them pieces of information, right?
Mhm.
But it's interesting, the things that God wants us to know, he will always reveal them, because that stuff that what Peter just said and what you just said about Alexander, that's not in that's not in the word.
That's not in here.
But
no.
he allows historians
Mhm.
to actually pin some things too, so that we can, the Bible is all important, but for us to connect the dots.
Yeah.
Because what if we didn't know about Alexander the Great?
And you would ask the question, why was he so angry? When he,
Also in your non-canonical books,
yeah,
and also some good commentaries, which is non-canonical as well,
Uh-huh.
that explain the details that are not in the Bible. Like I have a book here that's non-canonical,
mhm,
that gives you some good historical facts.
right,
I want to point out some about the swiftness you said about Alexander, which we didn't mention, but the 4 wings that's on the leopard there,
yes,
that's what that represents, the swiftness of the invasion that he had. People always wonder why this image have four wings
Why the
of a leopard.
wings?
Well, leopard is agile anyway,
Yes.
but they put some wings on him. You know, so that's the imagery there when he said he came across, he didn't touch the ground, just swift.
And like I said before, it only took him 3 years to defeat the Medo Persian, the entire Medo Persian armies, different battles. But in 3 years, 3 short years, he had conquered the Medo Persian Empire and absorbed, within the Greek Empire.
So this is on the same line as the way God had revealed to Isaiah about Cyrus 150 years before he was born.
Exactly.
Yeah, now, even though in this vision, Alexander had already been born, he does the same thing here.
Mhm.
You know, he sees a vision of something that haven't happened yet, you know, and it is, of course, given to Daniel. Now, Daniel, like any of us should be, we have a lot of information here in Prayer Foundation Fellowship.
Mhm.
And I don't know if anybody else has thought about it, but like, why me? Why am I so unique that God would reveal to me, but other pastors and that's been in the business longer than me, or anybody here just don't get this information. So when Daniel, like John, you know, he says up in verse 1, he says, a vision occurred to me, Daniel, come on. Okay, and the reason why it's like that in your, I'll say some of your manuscripts is because Daniel is shocked. Daniel's not looking at himself as being worthy of this vision, you know? And so John does the same thing in Revelation. I, John,
Right.
you know, little old me, why am I given this this revelation from God about future events? Why not Joe next door? You know, so he's humble and even saying, I, Daniel, seen a vision. You know, Omar, Eric got this information. Why is it so easy for you?
Yeah.
And not for nobody else. You'll know better off than nobody else. So why can you get this and can't nobody else? So John is, in writing this, he mentions I, Daniel.
Yeah.
And John does the same thing in Revelation, because this revelation is, can be gotten from earthly wisdom.
Mhm.
You know, because it's earthly events that heaven sends to earth to bring to an end that God has ordained.
After he prophesied it.
Right.
Yeah.
So you see the beauty of Daniel even speaking and using his name here,
Yeah.
not so much that he's writing it, but amazingly, me, out of all the men in the world, you give this to me. And this is where we all should be humbly, just humble within ourselves to even be able to understand scripture. Now, I think all of us know that we've encountered people that we've been trying to explain the scriptures to, and they just kick against because really, they just can't see it.
Yeah.
And Daniel's given something here. And as we read it and tonight, and tonight you've done a very good job, we're able to follow along with you and understand it. Why me? Why you? Why the other guy can't get it?
Right.
You know, so.
Yeah, that has to be spirit led.
Yeah.
Even though these things, if you look and go at every prophecy that was given to every prophet, every man of God, or every priest, the prophecy is given, and it has an earthly conversation to the person they're talking, because it is still a group of people that earthly that needs to be moved in a certain direction. They have to be like for Cyrus, for Alexander, for Darius, it has to be in order that the people are being moved in. So that we know God is all knowing.
Mhm.
He utilizes his people to move other people according to the prophecies that they already know. You either gonna go with it or be ran over by it. So he gives people that wisdom. Those that obtain that wisdom, that listen to Daniel, that listen to the people that are rightfully discerning the word, they don't get ran over by the word. They're not shocked by it. So what Daniel is telling us is the spiritual side of things, so we don't get shocked by it. But the earthly side of things, we should also have seen it as coming true.
But in addition to that, the earthly side, talking about the earthly side of it, they don't know what's happening. They don't know prophecy. You know, they don't know, they know they're going through something. They know they're doing something, but they don't know where it's coming from.
And that's right, but you said something earlier, Eric, when you first started talking, you said, God showed man so that they would believe. So everybody that's hearing Daniel right now, you can't go back and discern the knowledge that the people had, who heard it, but we can hear it. We heard a prophecy given to Daniel. We know the timeline, that this hasn't happened yet. Alexander may or may have been born, but he might say, how is Alexander gonna come into power to eventually get to what the Maccabees had to deal with?
That goes along with, God ordains it. He allows it. And even the unjust, even the
Right.
unrighteous.
What I'm saying is that's living proof. So the part that we get to see here on this side of the earth is the proof that you want to prove it? Well, Daniel said this, and here's proof by historians, by Eric's teaching of the scriptures. We have the proof that if anybody would say they don't believe, if you don't believe that the Persian Empire was taken down in one day, you don't have to believe me as a believer. Just go read the history books. You see what I'm saying? That's the belief so that man can see what actually was prophesied, actually came to pass.
And what Daniel's also doing, and it's for us too, but Daniel's basically writing for, the Jewish nation.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
This wasn't written to the church, but the church gets it. We have it now, okay?
Mhm.
Now, it's like me and you was talking last week, God ordained the things to come to pass.
Right.
Then he builds on that from Genesis chapter 1.
Mhm.
Okay, so he established the end. Okay, and he established the beginning from that.
Mhm.
Now, and ordaining the end. In between that and the beginning, there's some things that God have ordained that will come to pass.
Right.
So in writing, and the angels giving Daniel the revelation, okay? So as the Jewish people go through life, he's giving them heads up that it's not gonna be easy. We're gonna have some tribulations.
Yeah.
Okay, and as we read it, we see some of this hadn't came to pass with last week and in chapter 9.
Mhm.
We are being showed that, hey, there's gonna be some perilous times ahead.
Mhm.
In other words, the world is saying things are gonna get better. The angels telling Daniel things are gonna get worse.
Exactly.
Real worse before they get better. So to pray for peace on earth
Mhm.
without the millennium in view is foolish, because he's saying here, things are gonna get worse.
Yes.
And so this revelation is for us as well. When we see the things start happening, we see prophecy being fulfilled. We don't get uptight,
Right.
okay? Because if we see the word getting better, especially after reading Daniel, then obviously we don't understand some on the way. Because he's confident the people who haven't went there yet, even the Jews who will read this today who believe, and the church who wasn't in here, that things are gonna wax, worse and worse.
Yeah.
So we'll see it spilling over as we get all the way, especially at the end of 9, that this book telling us things are gonna get real bad.
It's gonna speed up. Yeah, and like you said, and before, he writes he writes the end, then he go work it out. So that working it out is how the prophecy is fulfilled.
Yeah, the angel, the beautiful part about this is the angels gave the understanding of the prophecies, and they brought the prophecy to the prophets.
Right.
The book of Hebrews talks about that. In some other times it was given to the prophets from angels.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, though we read their stories, the understanding and the word comes to us by his son.
Yes.
Get it? So
Yeah.
we get it at a more superior rate than
Right.
they did.
Right.
At first level.
First level.
Okay, moving down to verse 8. Yeah, we just talked about verse 6 and 7, yes, go ahead.
Just a good thing on 4, it said pushing westward, northward, and
4?
southward.
Yeah.
He's pushing westward, northward, and southward.
I'll
He's
explain
in the
it.
east.
I'll
He
explain
was
it.
in the east. He was in the east?
Yeah.
Okay, that's why I thought he was. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, kind of.
And that'll come later on in the chapter, exactly where, you know, these places are.
Right.
If you,
Four Kings, sure.
yeah. So, in chapter 8, he talks about, verse 8, I'm sorry. Chapter 8, verse 8. Then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly, but as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. And this is what Daniel sees in his vision. He sees the victory of the he goat, and something happens. The great horn, we're calling this little horn, the great horn between the eyes of the goat is broken just as he reaches the height of his strength. Out of that grows 4 notable horns, which we'll say that, what the scriptures say, that's the 4 kingdoms, 4 minor kingdoms that arises when Alexander the Great is, I don't want to say he died.
You said 4 kingdoms that rose?
4
Kings.
minor kings that took over Greece after Alexander the Great died.
In other words, you're saying that because of this vastness, it took him 3 years to get all
Took
this
him 3
vast
years.
territory,
Right.
but only he was the only one who could handle it
He had soul power.
so far. When he died, it was broken up.
It was broken down into 4 sections. It took about 20 years for them to figure out
Who's gonna do
who was going to do what, and 4 of his generals took a section, and that was their, we call, minor kingdom.
I don't think that was done peacefully unless I got it better than me.
Yeah, no, when Alexander died,
It was fighting.
He didn't have a will and.
he didn't have any heirs.
Right, and
So
heirs, right.
in that time, he didn't have any heirs.
Yeah.
Right.
So his 4 friends, he generals, 4 generals, we call them generals, but there's 4 people. He kind of, if you think about it like David, when David was rolling through, if you go back and hear about the mighty men that was with him, that was kind of like a conquest. Those 4 men sometimes would go over and fight wars. Remember that David was over here, and Joab said, "Hey, come over to this city because if I take it, they'll take it my name." That's what Alexander was doing. He was conquesting. He was taking everything, but he fell ill. He was supposed to pass the kingdom. They were all waiting around saying, "Who was Alexander going to give the kingdom to?" And what Alexander did, he died. He didn't pass it to anybody. So the 4 kings said, "Instead of us, we were all friends. Let's split it. Let's split these 4. Let's split what Alexander had in the 4 kingdoms, and each one of us will run a region the same way, and we'll still honor it as Greek."
Now, you need
But they
to
were
think about
4
that.
separate. Yeah, go ahead.
The neat thing about him is, he conquered,
Yes,
okay? Christ conquered.
yes.
He died at 33.
Christ did too.
Christ died at
But Christ was crucified. That's the difference.
But there's a lot of.
A lot of similarities.
Yeah.
But as we'll see later, Alexander the Great, I mean, he was 20 years old when he took over the kingship. And that's kind of young for a king, you know, even then. But he was all about conquering. That's what he did. That's what that was his, that's what he did. I guess nothing else mattered to him. Because I can't say again, he was a war machine. He wanted to conquer the world. It's what he wanted to do, and he did the known world at that time.
Right. Our civilization still holds a lot of something there.
He was a strategist. He was a war strategist, and some commented he was the world's greatest war strategist, even at that young age. From 20 to 23, he did some things that no one else in history had ever accomplished before or since. So this verse represents the untimely death of Alexander the Great and the division of the empire into 4 major sections led by 4 of the king's generals. It's recorded that Alexander had conquered more of the world than any other ruler And he did this before the age of 33. He died when he was 33 years old. It took about 20 years for the empire to be successfully divided. And there's 4 generals. One named Cassandra ruled over Macedonia and Greece. Lysimachus took control of Thrace, Bithynia, and most of the Asia Minor. The third, Seleucus, took Syria and the lands to the east, including Babylonia. And the fourth, Ptolemy, established rule over Egypt, Palestine, and the Arabian Petraea. Daniel's prophetic division predicts that the empire of Alexander was divided into 4 divisions, and it was later fulfilled as prophecy had been predicted. So prophecy was made. It came to pass. History records that. So we see that this wasn't anything that man did. This was, you know, God orchestrated all of this. He prophesied. He said it was going to happen, and it came to pass. And a lot of people during that time tried to attribute what was going on to mankind. They tried to say that the way it's written, it was written after the fact. But no, it clearly states here through Daniel, through his vision, he saw this. God showed him all of this, and then it came to pass.
Time of the Mason version.
Right.
This great.
And this actually during the time that Daniel didn't even know that it was Greek and Roman Empire that was going to follow behind the Babylonian Empire. At that particular time, that wasn't revealed to him. So the little horn says in verse 9, it says, out of one of them, the 4 kingdoms, a rather small horn which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. It grew up to the host of heaven and caused some of the hosts and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down. Verse 9 and 10. The little horn came forth, and Canaan, Palestine of Canaan, lay between Syria and Egypt. If you look at the map, that's where that area lies. The little horn magnified himself and grew up to the host of heaven. Who's the host of heaven we're talking about here? He caused some of the hosts and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down. This is God people that talked about in tribulation time, right?
So is that not Israel itself?
Yes. Yes.
And that's the parallel point. Like Daniel is giving a revelation of so many different parts of Israel history that we as the believer, we hear it and we see the end time. But you know, to somebody it might be mystery. What happened in John? God has given us that glimpse of it, just like he gave the prophecies to them to see what's happening. If you read certain books, it's telling you exactly what Daniel was already talking about here.
Yeah.
Yes, it's further talking about Revelations, but it's also talked about with the Jews and the Hebrews, where the Hebrews went through up until Daniel. You know, the different captivities, different kings, like they're being led astray. A lot of those leaders, they came in with peace treaties. And they came in different things. They said, well, if you sign this peace treaty here, we'll let you do the Sabbath, but we gotta put also a place for Dionysus. We also got to do this, and that was forbidden. And so a lot of the leaders were saying, okay, and that's the fall of those leaderships, that as those kingdoms started to take over.
Let us keep in mind that when Daniel had the vision, Daniel didn't have all the answers, right? He had a vision. He knew what he saw, but he couldn't interpret it. He needed help. And that help came from where? Came from God through the angels. Couple of times we read in throughout that Daniel talked to the holy ones. They call them the holy ones. In certain passages, they named them by name, Gabriel. But that's who they're talking about, the angels. God revealed to the angels, like Pastor Ken said earlier, and the angels revealed those things to Daniel and the other prophets. Verse 12 says, now verse 11, we're talking about the tribulation time. So keep that in mind. Verse 12, on account of a transgression, the host will be given over to the horn along with the regular sacrifice, and it will fling truth to the ground and perform its will and prosper. Now,
Discover who the little horn was, the name, you know what it is?
yes, the Antichrist.
No, you didn't know that, but yeah, we know it's
I
Antichrist.
have,
11:31.
we're on eight, nine, right?
8, 9,
It says out of one of the 4 generals, one
Right.
of those regions, a little horn came up. Okay, that's not the Antichrist there, because remember now, we're dealing with Greece, not Rome.
exactly,
Okay,
exactly.
So-
That's
this is a type,
type of Christ.
Epiphany there. He's
Right.
a prototype,
Right,
okay, he's a prototype, so
right,
we could say he's the Antichrist forthcoming. So he's a little horn. When you looked at Rome being revived, this is not Rome revived,
this is Greek.
this is Greece. So we
Right.
got that in 7, when we read last week, we got a picture of the Antichrist. Okay, but here, he kind of backing up before the Antichrist comes.
Mhm.
During this time, when the 4 generals took over, Seleucus, out of that region, is where this little horn rises up at, and it's actually a man who's not the Antichrist, but he's a shadow of the Antichrist.
Exactly.
That's
And-
he also got.
Go ahead.
But no, I was saying he was also the one that when he went in and after said he was flung out or he laid his offer, he tried to go into the temple, and when he tried to go into the temple, and everybody in all of the Israelites came together and they all lamented, they all prayed. And then Archus was like, hey, I'm king, I'm in charge of this region. And when he went into the temple, he was flung out. And he never went back. He from that point on began to try and go after the leadership.
Stop the sacrifice.
Stop the sacrifice. He started to put so many practices in play. They couldn't make the slaughters, they couldn't do that. So he was trying, when they say one will come and he will try to change the times, the days, the seasons. He would come and say, y'all can't do your Sabbath on a Saturday. Y'all gotta do it on this day. And they would say, wow, we're supposed to do it on this day. And he realized it's not working. That's where the Maccabee revolt came, because he warred with them on a Sabbath. He slaughtered them. And that's when they said, we gotta fight back. Keep doing pagan the Sabbath.
And you're talking about the little horn
I'm talking
in
about
Greece.
So everything that they were saying, Daniel saying, taking the host away, causing the people to stray, changing the times, all of that stuff that we see as something else that's also a foreshadowing was actually happening to Israel
Right.
during the Maccabean revolt.
And we see it repeated again during the tribulation with the Antichrist.
Right. Sure. Greater degree. To a greater degree.
This, I think, chapter 8 of Daniel can be the most confusing one when you get to this point. Because a lot of people think that he's the Antichrist by the way he describes him. But you gotta connect the dots. Remember, the main key here is we're dealing with Greece and not Rome.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you gotta keep it there.
And he did exactly what the Antichrist is going to do in
Right. Yeah.
the
We're
Roman
working
Empire.
backwards. 7 jump all the way to the Antichrist.
Right, right,
Chapter 8's backing back before the Antichrist. It's not in sequence.
right, right. So the little horn exalted himself equal to the commander of the host, which is Christ, right? And by him, like Petey was just talking about the daily sacrifices was taken away. Place of Christ's sanctuary was cast down. Because of transgression, the truth was cast down to the ground, and the little horn practiced its own laws and prospered. Simply means that he ruled. He thought of himself as God. He displaced the true God and the true practices and laws and practices of the Jews with his own laws and practices, and which is what's going to happen during the tribulation, and we'll talk about that one later. But he did the same thing to a lesser degree. That the little horn in the tribulation, or the Antichrist in the tribulation, will do in the future. So when I was doing my studying this little horn and the little horn of the tribulation, right? This little horn was opposed by the people. The little horn in tribulation will only be opposed, can only be defeated by who? Christ himself. In tribulation he will be strong, and I think we talked about a little bit of that last week. He would be strong, he would be charismatic, he would be all of those things. He'd be propped up by Satan himself, and his demise will come at the second coming of Christ.
Now, I'm saying correlation with that is the little horn that was actually taken down by the Greek was from Judea and Judah, which where we see that this was a right. Look who defeated the little horn. You know, Daniel was saying, hey, this defeat is gonna come from God, somewhere in there. It came from the people whose act was from the tribe of Judah. And the tribe of Judah were the one that rebelled, eventually defeated, and they actually set up Judea Maccabee as the kingdom. Well, he didn't call himself a king, but they looked at him as the ruler. So he started to deal with those four kingdoms. But that was after, and they actually set it up. I believe, I can't remember what scripture it was, where John was talking about them going down to a festival. Yeah, that's the festival that came from that war. Festival of dedication. The menorahs they lit, they wore with them, and for 8 days they had the menorah. So this all has a picture that you can see as something playing and going through the whole battle and understand it, but it also has something that's kind of like dim to us that we barely understand, the actual end time. Yes.
So we're down, we're going to go down to verse 13, and I'm gonna read that. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that particular one who was speaking, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply, while the transgression causes horror, so as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled? The holy one he's talking about here is the angels, right? We discovered, or we saw that in earlier chapters. They are referred to as the holy ones. So Daniel was pondering over the vision, and he was perplexed. He couldn't translate it himself. He had the vision, he knew what he saw, but he could not understand it. So it took the angels, as we stated earlier, sent by God to reveal it to him. The Holy One said to Daniel, 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. That statement itself indicates that they're talking about a time in the future, right? Sanctuary that we're talking about during tribulation and when when Christ comes to defeat Satan and the Antichrist.
It's not the death of Antiochus Titus.
I'm at 14, Ken.
Yeah,
Verse 14.
yeah, that'll be the death of Antiochus. That's where we get Hanukkah from, the Feast of Lights.
And then the holy place will be properly restored. Okay.
I'm just, putting that to, I see David asked a question here in this vision. But I heard a holy one speaking and another holy one said to that particular one who was speaking, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply? While the transgression caused horror. So as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled, we talked about that earlier, been trampled.
Yeah.
Okay, he said to me, 2,300 evenings and mornings, and the holy place will be properly restored. That's just on the Feast of Lights,
The dedication.
So
And that's 3.15 days. That's the time frame around it. And if you look at the time frame before the desecration of the temple to the rededication is 3 years.
Sure.
So that's where a lot of these numbers that we hear in Daniel doesn't have, like you said, what we have. That's what we can put it together. So
you mentioned Judas Maccabeus, so I was doing that at the time.
So what does it mean by evenings and mornings?
Sacrifices. They have sacrifice in the morning, sacrifices in the evening. Remember the Feast of Lights. So we get Hanukkah from it.
And that constitutes one day, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
go back to Genesis. Remember we were talking about days.
Yes.
I got math is in the Bible. Talking about 24-hour days. And
Yes.
we said these are the days.
Yes. And when we're talking about 42 months, that corresponds with the 3.5 years, correct?
Yeah. So these are prototypes of what's to come.
Yeah.
It's actually gonna happen before it happens.
Yeah.
It's a precursor to, it's setting the stage, it's a foreshadow, if I may say.
Of the tribulation.
And if you look at it, the fight just keeps getting bigger.
Right.
First it starts the snake Adam and Eve first fight. And man keeps, as you said, wax and wanes first. Every fight, it's bigger and bigger to set it up. Because if you really look at how these fights are going, how these wars that the men set themselves up to be. I mean, they have a massive and great army, something that the children or the ones that will be behind or in the revelations that Daniel's talking about, they're going to be greatly outnumbered. Greatly outnumbered. Also, there will be no chance for victory outside of God. You see how these wars, how these things, they play out right in front of you repeatedly throughout the scriptures. Daniel's probably the one that's given us the most clearest part of it. And I always say this, Daniel gave us a clear part about it, but people said it was non-canonical to explain what Daniel was saying. So a lot of people read Daniel and say, it's mystery. I don't know what in the world Daniel is talking about. But if you're missing a whole other book, it kind of takes it away. But that's a different thing. But as you're teaching it, these are the things we can pull out by a different commentary or different things that everybody reads or sees.
And also that has a correlation also. If you go to Ezekiel chapter 41, starting with verse 1, it speaks of Ezekiel 41, starting at 1, all the way to the 43rd chapter, to the end of the 33rd chapter. Speaks of the temple, Ezekiel's temple that would be built. That's like 3 chapters. 3 chapters of information, and you can read that on your own. But that's 3 chapters of information of how the temple would be built. This is not something that, happens overnight, right? Takes time. Back to Daniel, verse 15. Verse 15 says, when I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it, and behold, standing before me was one who looked like a man. And I heard the voice of a man between the banks of Uli, and he called out and said, Gabriel, give this man an understanding of the vision. Now, what are we talking about here?
Get the angels commands, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, like a mighty man.
So Gabriel is the angel that's revealing this to Daniel. But it's only one voice or one person that commands the angels, right? And that's God. Doesn't say specifically in those words here, but that's who we're talking about.
If you wanna get an answer, you can actually go to Kings. First Kings chapter 2, when Solomon is talking to God. He's asking for that. He says, I don't know anything, I don't understand anything. Can you give me wisdom? And we know that Solomon's a continuation of a promise to David. So we see a direct conversation between God and Solomon, and he gives him that knowledge. We see the same thing happening now, just through a third party, because we also see that man isn't as close to God as they used to. Daniel, even though close to God, he needs the understanding, so God sent him an angel to do so. Different than Solomon, but same in concept.
Yeah, Eric, we always use scripture, what you were talking about as far as he doesn't specifically say God has given the orders there, but we know in other places, I think it's Isaiah where it speaks about the angels beholding the face of God.
Right.
They basically are waiting for him to give any type of instruction.
And a lot of other scriptures that, give you the answer to that question for you.
Yeah, and we was talking about that the other day we were talking about tongues, God is speaking to the angel here in, I think it's verse 2. Verse 16 says, I heard the voice of a man between the banks of Uli, and he called out and said, Gabriel. And so there's no unknown language to man that God or the angel speak. And Daniel hears this voice speaking to Gabriel. In verse 2, because the one he saw standing, I think it says in verse 15, when Daniel had seen the vision, I saw to understand it, and behold, standing before me was one who looks like a mighty man. That's Gabriel. And I heard the voice of a man between the banks of Uli, and he called out and said, Gabriel, give this man an understanding of the vision. Yeah, I think it's commands from the Lord.
Yeah.
Another angel.
Yes.
I think that that heavenly gibberish they have.
And you
Gibberish that only the angels and God understand.
I don't even want to start that. I'm gonna let that one go. That's too.
That's a good point. How you said it shows that he speaks to them in a language that
They
they can
understand.
understand.
If you notice that anything that is not understood in here, that has even the terms where it was written on the wall with the finger in the language today, somebody comes along to have an interpretation.
Interpret it.
And that's what Paul was talking about. That's the information. But to stay on what you were saying about gaining the wisdom, when we talk about Solomon's wisdom, a lot of people think that narrative is Solomon's wide awake. Solomon received the same vision of the same wisdom and a vision. So we see that when we're the same way that Daniel received his information, God is unchanging. He's still giving them the visionary dream, and when they wake up, and it's all for the same purpose. Solomon didn't get the wisdom because Solomon wanted to be the wisest man. Solomon asked for the wisdom so that he could guide the people. Daniel's prophecy is for the same purpose because he's only repeating what Jeremiah did for him when he went into captivity. Why wouldn't I have this information and decimate amongst our people to tell them that you might not be around when Antiochus comes? but this is what your children may endure. And if you have time and read the books of Matthew, you would see that the only reason that they were able to even, go through so much turmoil is because they still wasn't listening to what God was saying. So he was continuously raising the champions up during it. And we see that in the final story of Christ going to the cross. We hear it in the book of Revelation. So it's all, even John, he was given a vision. And wasn't he dreaming? Was John? Was John?
John was a vision.
Yeah, it's vision.
But they were, but you see what I'm saying? Their vision. He says, I give man vision, dreams, or in John's case, when he was awake, he took him away. So it's just proving to us that the visions and dreams are continuous. Once again, we see we see the distance that man got from God. So we see that the angel came instead of God delivering the message itself. But we also see that the angel didn't come by itself, because you can go back also to when God said, I will send one from the left to give Saul the spirit that he had, on the spirit of jealousy. So we know that the angels are commanded by God. I wouldn't question that. Don't question it at all. It's too bad. Huh? Yeah, it's too much scripture to support what we see with Daniel. I don't have to say, well, let Petey tell you about it. I mean, I could, but I think it's better if you argue with Solomon.
That part.
Yeah, argue with Solomon. You wanna know how Solomon did, why he did it? But I know it's always for the people. So when Daniel was giving us a vision, it's for our benefit, for everything. Sorry.
And you'll see at the end of this chapter where, Daniel, his concern is for his people. He wasn't afraid for himself. He wasn't concerned about himself. His concern was for the people of Israel. So verse 17, Daniel was frightened. Yes. Do you think that maybe Daniel didn't know that the vision was for the time of the end? He had to be told that. Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, told him that it was for the time of the end. That's why in the end of the chapter it says, he was sick. He didn't tell anybody what he had saw. So remember, the church age wasn't revealed to Daniel, and maybe he needed more understanding of what he saw. Yes, he did. Daniel was frightened, not for himself, but for the people who he knew would be there to experience what would happen. So now we go down to verse 20, the ram's identity.
Do you think Daniel might have been a little bit intimidated too, because these are new visions, meaning he doesn't see the kings? Like, you think about it, when he got the vision of Nebuchadnezzar,
Right.
Daniel didn't really show any shakiness of it. He just let me go find out and get the answer from God. Because he knew Nebuchadnezzar was right there. He also had the word of the prophet Jeremiah. And this is just like a kind of local question. Do you think that Daniel now receiving new information, that's the reason why he was scared? Because up till now, has anybody seen like the coming of the kingdom, the people going away? You're already in captivity, and your captivity time is coming up. You're like, man, I'm about to get out of captivity, and it's just going to happen tomorrow. So when I walk out of captivity, you think that not for him, but for his people.
That's my point.
He sees the same information, but just in a different vision, because he saw the same thing in the dream. It was just the leopard. Okay, he saw the same thing in Nebuchadnezzar's vision. It was just the waist. The torso area down here. That was the grease. So he see the same thing, but it's in a new style.
It's like
instead of seeing the leopard and instead of seeing the waistline, he sees a goat and a ram. You don't see a chest and a barrel now. He sees a goat and a ram.
So you say you see the same event?
He sees the same event.
The parts of it.
No, he sees the same event. He sees the same conquering. He just don't see it in the barrel and in the chest being overtaken. You see what I'm saying? He's seen a ram being overtaken. Cause see, in Persia, they symbol in Persia is ram.
Exactly.
That's their symbol. You
And
know,
and the
you see them in-
Greek is the goat.
And Greek is goat, so, right, so in Nebuchadnezzar's vision, you seen the chest and the arms. And in Daniel's vision, you seen the bear. And in Nebuchadnezzar's vision, you seen the waist and the thighs. And in Daniel's vision, you seen the leper with the 4 heads. Okay,
Which is the
now,
4
he-
kings.
yeah, with 4 kings, but now he sees the chest and the arms and the bear, he sees them in the style of the ram with 2 horns. 2 horns means a person.
Yeah.
You know, left and right arm means a virgin.
Yeah.
Very lopsided means a virgin.
Yeah.
And so he's seeing the same vision, but he's seeing it in a different style.
Seen
He-
more
and
of.
notice here, he doesn't go back to the Babylonian, he doesn't go back to
No.
the head of gold.
No, no.
You know, he's past that. Because now he's sitting in the style under Cyrus when he has this dream. Because he says, well, no, yeah, because no, he see it during Belshazzar's time.
Yeah,
So he still see it under the Medes and the Persians, but he see everything after. I mean, he sees it while he's in Babylon under Belshazzar, but he sees what's coming after.
right.
So it's the same vision but a different style.
And you
Another
might,
piece of the puzzle.
yeah,
another piece
you
of
might
the
say
puzzle.
it's more
It's the
information that he's
It's the
given.
same piece of the puzzle
Right.
because it's the same Medes and Persians and it's the same Greeks.
But this was the reason why I asked. the
More
question.
detail, more pitch, another picture.
Yeah, more details. That's the one good way to put it.
And the reason why I asked that question is, because if you go on to the very next thing, Daniel was so worried because he couldn't find it, that he goes into the very next thing where he said he went back to see what Jerry, and that's why I asked, this new information today wasn't striking because I went back into the paper and Jeremiah said, we only have to deal with this 70
Right.
years. But I just went back and I got something past that 70 years. What do I don't even understand the information that I got past the 7 years. Because if you go to 9, you go to 9 and you can start at you can start at 3. And he says, so I set my face towards God, the God to seek by prayer and supplication with fasting and sackcloth. And before, I'm sorry, in 2, he says, in the first year of his reign, he's talking about the previous king. They observed the scriptures of a number of the years according to the word of Jeremiah, given to Jeremiah for the prophet, for the completion of the ways of Israel will be 70 years. So he has that in mind. This 70 years, so he's supposed to, now I have to tell people about something past the 70 years. How are they, how they didn't even want to hear 70 years, because if they did, they could have, but not avoided it. But you see what I'm saying? If they would have hearkened, now I gotta tell them that in another couple of years, you're gonna do something even greater. It's gonna take people away. So Daniel has a lot, when I see it from up, he has a lot that he's dealing with this information, especially knowing. It's like knowing something, but then also not knowing something at the same time.
And to be sure, I mean, they're almost at the end of the 70-year period. So,
So you tell them, I gotta do this again.
you know, some things had already come to pass that was
Yeah.
previously ordained.
While he's saying this, it's before the handwriting on the wall. Because it was
Right.
3 years before.
Right.
The first year.
Yeah, the first year of Belshazzar's reign. So he's saying all this before the handwriting on the wall.
He needed some clarification.
And when he got to the handwriting on the wall, now we see why the handwriting on the wall, to Daniel was like, oh, let me go in here and tell you everything that I've already talked to the angels about. It's just for whatever reason, now it's time for y'all to know it.
Yeah.
And that what, one day, right? Or fell one day, right?
Yeah, one day.
So Daniel knew about the fall. 3 years
This
before it happened. That's a long time. to
Before
carry.
the writing on the wall?
Yes, because if we go, let's go back to chapter 8, verse 1.
8 verse 1?
Yeah,
7,
well, chapter 8, verse 1.
okay. The 3 year,
There'll be a spot here, I know you will. Your spot.
Yeah.
How long did Belshazzar reign? Well, anyway, let's look at this here. In the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar, the king, a vision appeared to me. Okay, so this vision appeared to him, and this is the second subsequent vision. So he had one before.
Exactly.
This vision appeared to him before the handwriting on the wall. Because when he told him about the handwriting on the wall, that happened that night.
And that's the night that Belshazzar
but
died.
but he got this way before the handwriting on the wall.
Mm,
Those piece of cake when he walked in there,
yeah,
you know.
he knew what was going to
So
happen.
had they never called him in there, he'd be laying in his bed knowing that this gonna happen.
Yes.
You know, because he's giving the vision. It's like us knowing, right now, really what we're studying, we're getting ready to get into eschatology, we're winning the Psalm 7. We can live comfortably knowing everybody's future in the world.
Yeah.
One or the other, either you're gonna be perish or you're gonna be in glory. We know that. Daniel knows here what's coming for these guys. You know, now he might not have had a vision of the handwriting on the wall before the handwriting on the wall happened, but he knows that this kingdom under Belshazzar is doomed because he's seen it all played out in vision.
And the thing about handwriting on the wall, you might not have known that, and I would say
That's what I'm saying. I don't think you know.
he didn't have to, because the handwriting on the wall was just it was more full of information for him.
And it was just a stern warning for them.
To be honest with you, it wasn't even a warning. It was something for us to see as believers, seeing the scriptures in such rich context years down the line. Because that kingdom fell that night. What was the point of Daniel didn't even have to go there. It was for us to see that what God says comes true. Right. No matter how you look at it, no matter how Daniel got he's been actually talking about the different things that are going to come true or happen or has happened is being proven. This is a book of prophecy and prophecy fulfilled all at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's what hits when it comes to reading the book of Daniel, because like, is he talking about now, or is he talking about later, or is he talking about 50 years down the line? Is he talking about tomorrow? Like, and that's what I said when I say that last line.
Well, Daniel was, I wouldn't say he knew exactly when everything was going to be happening. He knew that Belshazzar's kingdom was going to come to an end. He knew that. There were some things that Gabriel had to point out to him about later, future events. He knew it, just like he knew, he looked at the statue there and he knew there would be 4 kingdoms, but he didn't know where those 4 kingdoms, I mean, he didn't know it was, he knew about Babylon. He didn't know about the Medes and the Purge. At the end of Babylon, he knew about the Medes and the Purge coming in, but he didn't know anything about the Greek and the Roman Empire. He knew the empires would rise, but he didn't know who they were.
And that's the beauty. That's the beauty of kind of what Daniel was showing. We know that these things are going to come. We shouldn't be shocked. We should be just like Daniel. When Daniel had something confusing or something he didn't understand, he asked God. When he got the clarification, he continued on with the business as usual. In fact, it said he continued about the king's work with the information even being shaken. So that's, and I'm always, kind of taking the page out of the Bible, seeing the sovereignty of God and things. We see that. We see that Daniel understood, even though I know what's coming, I must continue doing what I have to.
And he knew who his kingdom would be after it was interpreted to him,
Right.
but not why he was seeing it.
Not while he was looking at the statue.
Right.
Yes. So we're in the interpretation part of it now. This is Gabriel talking to Daniel, interpreting his dream. So here's the shaggy goat. He represented the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between his eyes is the first king, and that is Alexander the Great, right? The broken horn and the 4 horns that arose in its place represent the 4 kingdoms, which will arise from Alexander the Great's kingdom, Greek kingdom, although not with his power. In that particular part of the verse, although not with his power. They were kingdoms within themselves, but they weren't the great Grecian kingdom that Alexander the Great ruled. They were considered lesser kingdoms. So minor kingdoms. So they didn't have the same power that Alexander the Great had.
It's also interesting too, right here, 19. 8, when Gabriel explained to the 8:19, particularly, look, I am making known to you what shall take place in the latter times of wrath. A lot of that, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, when we talk about wrath, it's usually with Israel's judgment. Something that is being utilized as a correction for bringing the wrath of God onto Israel. So when we hear this, when we go forward, it talks about the little horn. That was also during a time of wrath. For God's wrath was on Israel because of their disobedience. So we see that, and we see Gabriel saying, this is what's going to happen to y'all in a time of wrath. God's judgment for Israel for whatever wickedness that y'all do.
And like I said, this is letting them know, the Jewish people for comfort, that troublesome times is gonna come, so don't be shocked. That's why Daniel is revealing this. The Jews will read this, and even in the future, the Bible's still gonna be around. And hey, whatever Jew reads this, because this is for your people, he's writing this, don't be troubled. You've been forewarned about this. You know, so this is actually going to be telling them about the times that's going to come up on them, but it's confident, you know, to know that don't be troubled because it's going to get better in the end.
Exactly.
But you're in the middle right now, so on the way to what has been ordained for eternity, on the way there, there's going to be some troublesome time.
Yeah. And that revelation troubled Daniel.
Yeah, now,
Because-
it's not that it's just happening now. God is bringing this trouble.
Mm-hmm.
He's bringing this trouble because remember, I would say Satan is gonna be in hell with a pitchfork and, well, he ain't really nothing. He might be the devil, but he's God's devil.
Mm-hmm.
Like with Job, he couldn't do nothing with Job before he got permission. So he can't do nothing with these people outside of prophets. He didn't help God with his prophets. God set it up and he's a part of it.
He's just a vessel. Okay. Verse 23. I think we're down to verse 23. His power will be mighty, but not of his own. We already talked about that,
This is the
the little horn. His power will be mighty, but not of his own. In the latter period of their rule, when the transgressors have run their course, a king will rise. This is the other little horn, right? Insolent and skilled in intrigue. His power would be mighty, but not of his own. Who would this horn be? We're talking about the Antichrist now, right? Verse 24.
No, he's still talking about it's still, and that's what I'm saying, it's still talking about both, but it's
Yeah.
also prophesizing what's going to happen
in the end.
in the end. Remember, God doesn't have to make his message linear and say, tomorrow this is gonna happen for you. He's saying, this is the message. You can utilize the message I gave you today, tomorrow, Thursday, Friday. You can use it every day. The message I gave for them about the temple, the coming, is the same message we can take when
That's for both.
and Antichrist. But this right here, 24, remember Antiochus,
He did the same thing
he did the same, like he
that the
didn't have
Antichrist
power.
will do.
Remember, he was only under the power of the people. He didn't rule the areas. He wasn't in rule, but it was, as they said, hey, we need you to go down to Jerusalem. And he was like, well, I gotta go to Jerusalem, because we need somebody to rule it there. And when he went down there, he saw the richness of everything that Israel had.
Mhm.
The gold in the temples, their rich iron tradition. Remember, he's a Greek. Everything goes in the Greek. So when he came in, he said, oh, well, why can't I go in the temple and make a sacrifice? Like, oh, this is. Then he went back and told them about the riches that they had, and how Judea was built up. And even though Jerusalem, remember, Jerusalem and Judea is kind of separate.
Yeah.
Jerusalem people want to play ball, but these Maccabees who are in Judea, they uprising, you know, and then it begins. He's not in power. He think he is, but he's not, and eventually it leads to what we eventually get to.
Yeah.
About the revolt and everything.
Yeah.
Verse,
And also, this man being a type of Antichrist. And the Antichrist will have the attitude that this is their power. But they'll be an influence to giving the power of satanic power.
Yeah.
And turning it into themselves.
and that's when you're talking about the tribulation time there, right? Where,
I think it's both, it's showing the shadow and the future.
yeah, the
Yeah.
10 kingdoms will rise and the one horn will rise up from them. Verse 25, and through his shrewdness, and he will cause deceit and succeed by his influence, and he will magnify himself in his heart, and he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even oppose the prince of princes, but he will be broken without human agency.
Yeah, you say here. He would destroy many. Are they at ease? Are they at ease? What do you mean by they at ease?
They'll be comfortable. They're gonna believe what the imposter, what the
It will be on a Sabbath rest.
Yeah.
And that's the small picture and the big picture, because the Sabbath rest, what Antiochus, what he did is he couldn't beat them. Like they locked themselves in. So what he did is it started with smaller stuff, but he started anyway. He said, it's the Sabbath. He learned their cultures. And when they were at rest, he came and slaughtered them. And that's what started all of the revolt. And it's the same concept. When we are at ease and we are at peace, it's when the devil is going to try and attack with everything, just like Antiochus did. And to say he's an antichrist is the best term, because that's how he was described.
Yeah.
By not an antichrist. They called him a false god. That's what they didn't say antichrist back then. They just called you a false god. Meaning you were setting yourself up as an El or a deity, which you were. And that's what the Jews called him. They said we're going to serve him.
And that's basically the same concept that what did the Persians do to the Babylonians? They were at ease. They were, yeah. Don't.
That's the thing, which is valuable. That's the narrow view, but also the wider view here, because from the eschatological standpoint, from the eschatology, from the end time standpoint, it speaks of the time when people are going to be lulled to sleep.
Yeah.
To seek peace and safety because of this, with the treaty out.
Yeah, the Antichrist, the false prophets though, will be the ones saying peace and
Peace
safety.
and safety, yeah.
But see, now the church is gone, that's why I said I think it's both.
It's both, right?
And so they're gonna be at ease because they're gonna buy into this peace and safety. And that's all it says, it's sudden destruction will come on them like a thief in the night.
Right.
So this is, and then, of course, all this trouble that they're gonna be going through is called the day of the Lord. Even though it don't seem like it's the day of the Lord, because you think you're just glorious, but the day of the Lord is different from the day of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
The day of Christ is when you come to the church,
Mm-hmm.
peaceful time. The day of the Lord is the day of vengeance and wrath. And at some point, it's gonna be God pouring out his wrath from man on man.
Mm-hmm.
And as it go on, eventually it's gonna take it completely from man. He's gonna start dealing directly from heaven. When we get into the bowl judgments and the trumpets, we'll get into that.
And it was a lot of the stuff that they lost. These things where Antiochus can come in and set up himself as a god. Because over time, Israel had been in so many wars, cast them out in captivity. A lot of their records and things are lost. Even going into Babylon, the language that was spoke in Babylon, it was a 50-50. Half of the people that came in versus half of the people there just started speaking the language they heard around it, because it's easier. So where Daniel didn't get last, and he maintained who he was, and we see that also through the book of Daniel, as you show us, is that it's going to be that same thing. It's going to be ways that people are going to be made to be comfortable. And I honestly don't think it might happen in a lifetime. If it does, thank the Lord. but that won't be. But it's the same thing that Daniel was doing, and you're teaching us through Daniel, is we're to do, because we might not be here, we're just preparing those who are going to be here.
So in reading verse 26, after explaining the meaning of the ram and the he-goat and the four horns that came up in the place of the great horn, the angel Gabriel explains the little horn that came out of one of the four horns. It's the vision that was given without interpretation. Daniel might have thought that the little horn might be some small monarch, whatever, that rose out of one of the four horns. But Gabriel tells us in verse 23 that he is not to arise until the latter time, when the transgressors are come to the full. You see that, 23? So that's something that something else that Daniel didn't see in the first vision. This is more, like I said, it's more, it's like a progressive. Each vision that he had is progressive. He's learning more information. He's getting more revelation of the same thing, but it's just more information of it. So a little bit about Alexander the Great. I in the history books. Alexander the Great was the son of Philip, Macedon, who became king at the age of 20. 2 years later, he leaped the Hellespont, which is the narrow strait, is the waterway, making the Black Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. So a lot of battles went on during that time around this body of water. Ken mentioned the four wings, the swiftness of Alexander the Great's campaigns, his you know, how he conquered. He says with about 30,000 infantry and 500 cavalry, he defeated the Persian force on the banks of the Gracchus. A year later, he defeated at Issus and a Persian army of about 600,000 men. Commanded by who? The Persian king Darius. Yes. After some other minor skirmishes, conquests, and you know, like we said earlier, Alexander the Great, he was all about warring and gaining more territory, expanding his kingdom. He returned to Syria, where on the banks of the Tigris River, he defeated an enormous army led by King Darius. Later, he returned to Babylon, where it was the climax of his glory. He died of marsh fever and intemperance in his 33rd year. He was sick. He wasn't killed. He was sick, and well, he was killed, but not by the sword. He was sick, and he died at the age of 33. From there came the four horns that prophecy foretold of the four generals dividing the territory of the empire among themselves. The four horns may therefore be named Macedonia, Thrace, Syria, and Egypt. These kingdoms were in time absorbed by the fourth world power, which is the Romans. Although there were four world powers, they were not to succeed each other with. In my studies, this is not shown in the image because it's one kingdom right above the other kingdom, but what's not shown in the image, nor in the vision of the wild beast, it's revealed in the vision of the he-goat. The break between the Grecian and the Roman Empire is covered by the four minor kingdoms, right? Kingdoms was between Alexander the Great and the stand-up of the Roman Empire. as prophecy predicted. Then the angel Gabriel explains the little horn, the king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy and prosper and practice. That's what we were talking about earlier. And shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Through his policy, he will cause business to prosper, and magnify himself, even stand up to the Prince of Princes, but shall be broken without hand. Chapter 11, 36 through 39 completes the picture of the little horn. If you want to go there. And that'll come up later. But in chapter 39, verse 36, says, then the king will do as he pleases, and he will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will speak monstrous things against the God of gods. And he will prosper until the indignation is finished, for that which is decreed will be done. Verse 37, he will show no regard for the gods and his fathers, or for the desire of women, nor will he show regard for any other god, magnify himself above them all. But instead he will honor a God of fortresses, a God whom his father did not know, for he will honor him with gold, silver, costly stones, and treasures. Verse 39 says he will take action against the strongest of fortresses with the help of a foreign god. He will give great honor to those who acknowledge him, and will cause them to rule over the many, and will parcel out land for a price.
We know he won't be a woman, he'll be a man.
To be man. 2 Thessalonians 2:8 reads, then that lawless one, talking about the same person here, then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth, and bring to an end by the appearance of his coming. And finally, Revelations chapter 19, verse 11 through 20, talks about the coming of Christ. And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and wages war. His eyes are a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems. And he has a name written on him, which no one knows except himself. He is clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies which are in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, were following him on white horses. From his mouth came a sharp sword, so that with it he may strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierce wrath of God and the Almighty. And on his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. Then I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried out with a loud voice, saying to all the birds which fly in mid heaven, come assemble for the great supper of God, so that ye may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of commanders, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of those who sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and slave, and small and great. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies assembled to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. Verse 20 says, and the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who performed the signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire, which burns with brimstone. That's the final, the coming of Christ, coming up the judgment after the tribulation. Any questions or additions or comments? I know I went pretty quick. Verse 27.
Yeah, when it said, and I, Daniel, fainted and was sick for days. It was overwhelmed.
Yeah, the information that he got,
And the information.
the revelation that he got from Gabriel, it said and it specifically says too that he didn't tell anybody. Right? So they didn't know why he was sick. They just knew he was sick. But what?
I was astonished by the vision, but no one understood it. So apparently after he recovered, he did tell someone. Because back up in 26, it says, therefore seal up the vision. He's telling him to remember it as truth.
Also, you can say that, well, Gabriel's talking to him there, right?
Right.
Seal up the vision could also mean not tell anyone. Right?
It could, but I think it means he's telling him to remember it. And if it's a warning and a sign for what to come, he would tell his people.
Well, NASB version says,
Keep the vision secret.
keep the vision secret. Right. I'll read 26 NASB. The vision of the evenings and the mornings which has been told is true, but keep the vision secret. For it pertains to many days in the future. And that's why he was sick, but they didn't know why he was sick because he didn't tell them about that part of it. He was exhausted and sick for days. Then he got up again and carried on the king's business.
Why would they say that no one understood?
No one understood why he was sick, why he was acting the way he was acting. They wasn't privy to the information of that Daniel got from Gabriel. Gabriel told him to keep that secret. He was holding on to that information, and that bothered him. He was worried about his people. In the end,
Could it be telling them to see what you have just seen as being true? What you've just seen is true.
yes.
It's, in other words, the vision of the evening and morning, which has been told, is true.
Mm-hmm.
Keep the vision true, or keep the vision secret, where it pertains to many days in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think he meant like don't tell nobody,
Right.
but keep it true.
They don't tell him why you're not eating about it.
And in the King James Version, verse 26, and the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told is true. Wherefore, shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days.
Right. And
Yes,
so to keep it, keep it true, keep it safe. It's a vision that's told to Daniel. Remember, it's told to Daniel for his people.
Yeah.
So when these things happen, it shouldn't be a shock to them.
In other words, no need to go back when it's saying.
Don't change nothing.
There's no need for you to change it because it's gonna happen exactly how it's saying. Like, you can try and deviate it and then, like, that's what I was saying. Daniel's worry is now, not his worry, it's like, I have this information and I can't do anything with it. First of all, I don't even know all of it. I can't even barely understand it. Gabriel had to break it down as much as it could. This information, it's getting, like, it's the same thing with Jeremiah. Jeremiah, everybody called him a weak prophet. Of course, everybody gonna beat you up when you go to every kingdom and say, hey, you know you can go in captivity, thump him in the head, send him on his way. But it's the same thing that's happening. Is Daniel's just not getting a thump on the head because of where he is in the kingdom. He's an older, he has the information, he's trusted, he's been there, he's going about sovereign business. But he's still on this whole kingdom tomorrow, Thursday. And that's why the angels say, no, you're later down the line, this is gonna happen.
Put a lexicon on for this word, secret.
What words are you talking about?
Now, okay, now Daniel,
Verse
when you
29.
get to chapter 8, now
Which
you're
area?
Daniel chapter 8, verse 26.
26.
When you get to Daniel chapter 8, now, remember, it changes from, Arabic.
To Hebrew.
Arabic.
To
When you
Hebrew.
get to chapter 8, he goes back to Hebrew.
Right.
That's what you do.
And that's what I'm saying. The kingdoms was divided. You had a kingdom that was speaking Aramaic, and then also the kingdom that was speaking Hebrew. They were speaking the oldest language, and then it was like,
Well, I don't know where my head by Hebrew, but you can look it up on the, in verse 26, but it's a secret.
26:7.
Which one? Chapter 8, verse 26.
8:26.
8:26.
The word secret. So I think he just don't want him to keep it true. You know, he said, shut it up. You shut something up, you can't change it, right?
He says seal up the vision.
Yeah, I don't have secret in it.
Seal up the vision.
Keep the vision.
But what you're saying, the word is true.
Yeah, what was your word in
Secret.
Andy, in King James?
Which verse? Which verse?
Verse 26,
8:26?
yeah. Because the lexicon.
It says,
Eight
shut thy
26,
up
the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told is true. Wherefore, shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days.
Shut up.
And for me, that's telling, you know, like Eric was saying, it's, don't be telling this vision.
Shut up,
It's,
shut up, is the word.
Right, but
We have to do word searching.
Yeah.
right?
Make
So
sure
there's
that-
two phrases. So anytime someone would shut up, it was either to be kept in or it's
Not change.
not changed. Like sheep, like the virgin, they will be shut up in the house.
Right,
They would not leave because they were to remain true.
right.
And it even talks about that when they came, the virgins actually came out because of the desecration of the temple. Why is my virginity important? The temple is being desecrated. So to be shut up, not to say like we use the term, I say this a lot too, big words, and they tend to change them. But to shut up meant to just be kept in truth, like it's unchanging. It is a virgin is shut up and a maiden is shut up in
She'll
her
still
tower.
change, she won't change.
She won't change. She's shut up in her tower. She won't change until the prince comes to get it. You know, that type of conversation.
So,
lexicon.
So- go ahead.
Had it, but it says secret.
You gotta look it up in
And
that
I'll
verse.
get back.
The latter part, the last part of that, for it shall be for many days.
Right, that means it's in the future.
Right. So in verse 27, you gotta read verse 27 along with that. And I, Daniel, fainted and and was sick certain days. Afterwards I rose up and did the king's vision. I was astonished at the vision. And I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it.
Understood it, I mean, he said it to somebody.
He told someone,
How would he know they didn't understand it?
Yeah. Yeah.
This stuff.
but it's just
None
that.
understood it, none will understand.
Huh?
Mine says that no one understood it.
King James version says no one understood it.
So if he tried to explain it, they didn't understand.
Right.
They wouldn't
So
understand it.
it's seal, close, or keep the vision, or keep secret or confidential, lock away and reserve for later. So it's not that, you see what I'm saying? It's reserved, but so it remains the same. Like you would lock, and that's why I gave the example of locking a damsel up in a tower. She's not changing. The information about her is not changing. Her purity is not changing. But that doesn't mean people don't know that the damsel's in the tower. He just doesn't have all, that's why we still see him trying to search out all the information. And we actually see, he asked people about it and nobody knew. So it's not that it's keeping quiet, it's just the information is. For that reason, it's sealed away, it's sealed away. You see, it's sealed away from him, right? It's sealed, even from him.
Like the information we have, there's a secret to the world,
Right.
and it's unchanging.
Right.
But it's not a secret to us.
It's shut up in us though.
It's shut up in us, it's shut them out. Anyway, okay, so.
Anything else from that?